All right, welcome everybody to All Roads Lead to Real Estate. I'm your host, Matt Ryan, and I am here with a client of mine who, and it's funny, I was saying I've been doing this for over a year now, and this is the very first time I have spoken to someone in your situation, shall I say, and it's one of the most common situations we deal with, and that is of a first-time home buyer going through this journey. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring you in is A, because you're lovely, and I thought you would be fantastic to speak with, but I just think the emotional experience that goes through not only the actual process of buying the home, but what leads into it, and all the concerns and all the things running through your head, right?
Oh, yeah, so much of that, especially as an overthinker. So,
and you are exceptionally analytical. So the reason you're in this chair is if you're listening to this at home and you're like, well, no, I'm type A. I'm going to think through every detail. Boy, they are not. You are. You are so fantastically with it. And so I thought you'd be a perfect person to hopefully to peel back, a few layers and to understand what that experience is like. And hopefully we can help some people that might be on the fence or nervous about what this looks like and feels like. Yeah. And we can help them through that journey because you closed so recently ago. How long ago was it?
What was it, Matt? Yeah. And first, thanks for having me. But yeah, it was, today's Thursday. It was last Wednesday. So
there
like what? Yeah. 7-8 days ago.
There you go.
And the whole process was so quick as well. So yeah.
It was. So, so welcome. And so you are also close in terms of proximity. Yes. So your new home, which you haven't moved into officially yet, is right down the road here in the Towson area.
Yeah, super close.
You're going to be neighbors.
I know, right?
So that's always excellent. So your name is Tarini, and so I just want to give a little background regarding like kind of where you're from and a little bit about your journey, just so people know who we're speaking with.
Yeah.
And so help me understand kind of where you're from, and let's go from there.
Yeah, so I'm Tarini. I grew up in Howard County, so Ellicott City, about 30 minutes from here. My background is, I've always been in startups and operations roles. And I decided, well, actually maybe we'll go into like how I decide to buy a house and move to the area. But, my brother, sister, and new baby nephew are in the area. And so that's kind of how I got acclimated with this area and decided to move here.
That's right. So you're from Ellicott City. So we probably grew up near each other. So I also grew up in Howard County, very, very close to Ellicott City and Sykesville. Yeah. And so you were born and raised there, and eventually, like you said, you moved over to the DC area.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I moved. So I actually, funnily enough, I went to school in Virginia, and then I moved to design school in New York. And so I was in New York actually for a couple of years, then moved down to DC, was there for about 3 years. And last year was working remotely all over, and decided that I wanted to kind of just like have some roots in one place. All my family's in Maryland. So that's how I decided coming all over, coming back to this area.
Well, welcome on back. We're proud to have you. And so as a side note, just an interesting tidbit, because I deal with people that move obviously all the time. You were describing the differences in personalities and type of people in the DC area because you were considering potentially staying there.
I was there. Yeah.
Here in the Maryland metro area. So in your words, how would you categorize that?
I think like the process over the last month really solidified like how I felt about moving back to this area. In that, I don't know, there was just more like a warmness to folks that I remember growing up with in Maryland. And I was really reminded of like working with you and your team, Matt, and then also with John and his team.
Lender.
Yeah, the lender. Yeah. And his mortgage team. And so I think like especially there was less of a coldness in a way. And I think I got used to that, especially living like in New York and in DC and even like abroad as well in certain cities. That's nice. It's more of like a suburban feel, but just more of a warmness and a community feel that I really found coming back here.
Yeah, I don't know if you meant it as a compliment, but as you were describing one of the reasons while we were pending, you were just like the general feel you get from everyone you're interacting with is just warmer. It's a nicer, kind of almost like a southernly feel. It's kind of like.
Absolutely. And it's like everyone's like looking out for you too. I think that's the thing that I feel like I really lucked out with, being connected with your agency and with you, is that I was really fortunate to find a place and gotten really lucky with the whole process and being supported and like advocated for throughout the entire thing. That I feel like was a little different from when I was like looking in DC, especially last summer, very briefly, but even from the first like interactions that I had there, I found a difference.
Right. That's awesome. Well, thank you for putting that in context. I don't know, articulated it so clearly. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Because that's how I feel about DC and some of these other. It's one of the reasons it's tough for me to move or consider moving.
Yes. And I always thought that I would live abroad. Honestly, like I was in London in the fall. I was expecting to move back there. Different circumstances and things changed, but I really feel like it all worked out for the best. And this entire process, I think, really solidified like why I wanted to move back here. And it really comes down to like the people in the community.
Right.
So.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah.
So not bad. So, okay, well, wonderful. So you decided to look this direction.
Yes.
And so leading up to that, so did you consider looking for a rental in the area just to find a spot for a year or two and then figure out what you want? Or how did you, like, what was going through your mind?
Yeah, I think, so I think most of like my post-college life was spent renting. And to be honest, I thought that I would be renting for like indefinitely. Like I was really like, I'm not going to buy a house. Like that's nothing I want until like for maybe like 10, 15 years down the line. I don't know where I want to settle down per se. And it's funny, like I got alerts from like Zillow and Zoopla, which is like an international, like, which is one based in the UK. Cause I was like, oh, maybe I'll move to London. Maybe I'll like move to this area. And I happened to get an alert for this place, that there was this home listed. And I was like, well, let me just check it out. I really like the house itself. I like the area. It's right down the street from, my brother, my sister. And so I just looked at it and like loved it. And I like that it's close enough to my parents in Ellicott City, but it's far enough that it feels different. Right. And the more that I just kind of like was around the area looking around, I enjoyed it even more. And so I think it was really that I also wanted an investment. I didn't really want to continue to rent and put money into something that could have potentially been something that I owned. So yeah.
Yeah. And so in America, it's interesting. You might not know the specific statistic here, but over 40% of the U.S. population rents at any given time.
Yeah.
And it's never, ever been basically, you've never had renters go below that threshold.
Okay. Interesting.
So it's not everyone's dream to own,
right,
which is always interesting because you always have a big subset of the population that has no desire to own. Yeah. And specifically, now that I'm getting older and older, it's the younger generation that's considering this thinking, I don't even want to think about that.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's your assessment as a non-real estate professional? Why in the world do so many people have no interest in ownership?
I felt the exact same way. Like if you asked me 3 months ago if I wanted to own a place, I was like, no. I was like, I don't want that. Like in my mind, I was like, I don't want that debt. I don't want like that commitment. I just like, it was just something that wasn't on my radar. And just I don't know, it was really like a feeling that changed for me. And I don't know really how to describe it because I was like diehard renter forever. That it was just it was like the right circumstance and the place itself was huge for me and the location and a number of things that like changed in life that brought me to that point. But I'm not surprised a lot of people don't decide not to rent. I think it feels like a daunting commitment. And it feels like a lot of money. And I felt the same way until I got a little bit more educated about it and like saw what my options actually were. And that made it a reality.
Well, and you're fortunate, right? You're a professional. You earn a good living.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so you are in a slightly different situation. Actually, the home that you ended up purchasing for a first time home buyer is well above the average first time home buyer's price point.
Yeah.
So you're very, I would assume like just
I'm lucky. Yeah.
Lucky.
I'm very blessed. Yeah. I'm very grateful. That's, I think the caveat is like, not everyone is able to be able to do that or like the price and those things. But I do have a lot of friends who are in like lower income thresholds and those kind of things who also all owned. And still for the longest time, I was like, I am not going to own a place. Even though all the friends around me for like 3, 4, 5 years ago, all bought places like in Baltimore, around the area as well.
Well, I just wanted to make sure to help not just educate you, but folks listening that yes, you're in a situation where you could afford a home. Right. There are people that think they can't.
Exactly.
Because that's not something that I heard you say when you were considering renting or owning. Most folks that I hear, the biggest obstacle for them is they think they can't afford it.
Absolutely.
It's not an option for them in their minds.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And that's not something I think you had to necessarily deal with, but that's a roadblock for a lot of people. And you probably, since you didn't necessarily qualify for grants and other financial based programs, they do exist and they're out there. They're really, really out there for most people that might otherwise think it's not out there.
Exactly. And I think too, I completely get like that completely makes sense, especially because I think I really didn't think that I would be in a financial position to like even fathom buying somewhere even half the cost of this place until probably like 2 years ago. Like just work and like life things changed that made me able to afford it. Because I had the exact same mindset about that like years ago. And I remember even going into friends' houses and I was like, if you don't mind me asking, like, how much did you put down? Like, what is your mortgage? Like, what are all these things? Because I really did feel like that 2-3 years ago. And again, this is like, it's definitely luck and other things that allowed me to be able to do this. But I even remember like going through the process with John, the lender, like asking him about like loans and other things too. And I think, and I didn't qualify because there are programs out there for those who really do need it. And I did not. And I didn't realize that until like I was educated on it as well.
And so that is, and shout out to John Wald, who is actually doing a program right now. He's doing his thing. But cool. I have certain lenders that I've hand selected, and John Wald is one of them, that are really, really good at understanding and explaining things to folks and making sure you understand what your options are.
Yes. Absolutely.
Because you're in a different bracket necessarily than a lot of first-time home buyers. And maybe my next first-time home buyer I might bring on is someone who might not have ever in their mind thought they'd ever buy a home ever. Right. Yeah. And I help those people. And that sometimes is even more rewarding because they don't have very, very, very limited savings.
Absolutely.
Even limited income in times.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing, right? It's they don't think that they're able to do that, but there's so many options and programs out there that like do assist to be able to do it. And again, like I definitely was in a very fortunate circumstance, but I think it's like educating yourself and like if there is the desire, like at least understanding what your options could be and like talking to folks who may be able to get you to that point just to even like lay it out or even plan for if you do have a desire to do that in the future.
Well, but you stole my whole pitch. That's what I tell to anybody. It's like, if you have the desire, I might not be able to help you buy today, but in the relative short term, I can virtually help anyone buy if they have the desire. Even if you don't have the credit you want, even if you have other debts, like even with student loan debt, there are programs you can get in the state of Maryland. You can get a portion, if not all of your student loan debt paid off at closing. Yeah. Now, granted, I call it the Goldilocks effect. You can't have too much debt, too little. There's all these qualifications. However, there are programs out there that people don't know about. So if this interests you, you need to go out there and speak to someone who can really understand your situation.
Absolutely.
And at least get you on the path to know what your options are. Yeah. So I'd say before you even make a final decision, it's to educate yourself.
Yeah. And it's like, that's like with anything as well, too. It's not like you have to buy a place tomorrow, but if you're like, like, okay, I don't like, because I think a lot of folks just don't think that they're even able to do like, whether it's buy a house or anything in life, but it's like until they actually like kind of seek out those options, or even if they have a desire to do it, there's a lot of cases where like, it's luck and other things, but if you have a desire to do something, it's like figuring out what's the path to get there. So
that's right. And so your path was finding a random home online on Zillow, you said, and you just clicked around, you found something you liked. And miraculously, you end up on a phone call with me.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. Yeah, I got an alert from Zillow, and it was
and
like,
when was this? I like to say this
so
just to
funny.
show you timeline wise.
Well, it's funny
from that
because
moment to this moment in this chair.
So you talk like I finally told a bunch of my friends that I was closing last week, and they were all like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" Because I was again that person who was like, "I'm not gonna buy a home." Like, even financially, if I'm able to, like, I just have no desire, like, I don't want the commitment, other things or whatever. So I remember it was the day after Christmas. So it was the 26th. I was visiting my brother, sister-in-law, and nephew in the area. I'd earlier that day gotten like an alert from Zillow of like, here's some listings like in the area or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And I remember we were leaving and I was like talking to my parents and I was like, hey, just take a right here. Let's like go down this street. And my dad's like, where are we going? Yeah. And my mom was like, obviously she wants to like look at a house or something. And my mom is like, has been so gung ho about me getting a house like over and over. Cause she really believes it, it's an investment. And like, she's like, all your rent money could be going into an asset and those type of things as well. And so we just drove by the house. I really liked it. So that was a Monday, I think, was it 26th, something around that. And then we went and looked at it on Thursday and then the Sunday after. And then I remember Matt giving me a call on Tuesday and was like, there's another offer. Are you serious? Like, do you actually want to put an offer in on this place? And I was like, yeah, I like it. And then 2 hours later it was accepted, which is wild. So, yeah.
So not everybody is that exact, timeline, but
so quick.
It occasionally happens that way.
Yeah.
And so it's because I think you've done some preparation and you knew your situation pretty well.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's just that it is possible to do it and that quickly. I mean, we're now speaking in essentially the first week in February.
Yeah.
And that essentially was January 1st. So it's, I've known you for 30 days.
Yeah, I know, right? Feels so much longer. But
it does.
that's the really cool thing is I think also personally, like when I'm made a decision about something, I'm pretty committed to it. Just because I tend to overthink things constantly. And so with this, I was like, I like it enough. I have a good feeling about it. Like, let's just move forward with this.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, and so part of that process is you kind of just put your faith when you click a button and pray for the best. That kind of, sometimes that's for all of us, right?
Right?
We have to start somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you started that. So I guess what emotions kind of went through you as you're touring that house? And you didn't, at that point, were you pre-approved yet?
I don't think so. No, I think I talked to John
afterwards.
On Monday.
I didn't introduce you to him until after we saw the first house, right? We saw the home together.
And I think I talked to John. Yeah, after we did both, I did the tour on Thursday with both you and Craig, and then on Sunday just with Craig, and then Monday morning I think I had a call with John because I was like, yeah, let me see what my options are.
Right.
And I think when I was touring the place, I was like, I didn't have that like, oh my God, this is the one. Like, I need this place. I was kind of like, this is cool. Like, okay. Like, I really like it. I like the area. Like, yes, there's things that maybe I would fix or this or that, but like, I like it. It wasn't like overly like, oh my gosh. And I remember specifically you and Craig asked, like, after we toured it, so what do you think? Like, what are your thoughts? And I was like, I mean, I like it. Like, no, like huge
fireworks weren't going off.
And it wasn't like, this is the one, like, this is my dream. Like that really wasn't the case. And I was like, I like it. And then when you called me being like, we got to put an offer in, I was like, oh, okay, let's do it. Like, I was like, I like it enough. Actually, backing up I think on Monday evening, the listing was actually taken down and I was talking to someone and they were like, oh, can I see it? And I couldn't find it. And I had this feeling, I was like, oh shoot, like I really did. I missed it. And then I think I reached out to you and we figured it out. But, so I think that did help solidify things when the thought of not having it, like what that felt like, and if that was strong enough for me to move forward. So I think it's like the lack of that actually helped solidify the want for it.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah,
that's interesting. So I guess knowing what you know now, is there anything you would say during that process? Because it happened pretty quickly, right? Yeah. So is there anything that you could think of? Would you tell yourself to either have read or to have thought about or done differently? So what advice, for example, would you give someone that wanted to buy their first home if you were to chat with them tomorrow? Is there anything you've learned through that initial experience?
I really think that I think it's like imagining yourself in the place, which is hard to do. That sounds very like cheesy, but I really was thinking about like, and especially for me, like I'm getting the place just on my own. So I thought about like, what would it be like just me living in this place? And like, what does my future feel like being here and other things as well? I think also, looking back, I was really lucky to have the team working with the team that I did, because I think like if there were certain things that happened or like friction or whatever, I don't know if I would have really felt so strongly about the place, and like that, like you and Craig and Emily and John had my back. Like, I think that was a huge thing as well too. Especially because I never interacted with like the listing agent or the seller even, or any of those folks. And so I think you guys made the process so much more seamless just by like the communication and like almost thinking on my behalf. Cause I think that's the thing. Like, I was doing so much Googling around like what to look for in an inspection and what to do about this and what to do about that. And like what a title company is and all these other things that I think you guys like communicated, like, here's the checklist of things to go through and here's what's coming up and that type of thing, that it helped like calm my mind and ease it, and not feel so overwhelmed by the process, because that's what I was expecting. I was like, I hear horror stories about people closing and like inspections and all those things. So I think the team in your corner really helps.
And it can help. And so so I wanted to first, before I put my 2 cents in, but was kind of what from your experience, like what it was like. So thank you for helping to describe that. Yeah. And if you're listening to this, in like what I would help and what I would suggest is first, before, like normally when I find someone specifically off of Zillow or some of these other sites, because you weren't referred directly to me, you found me somehow, right? That's through marketing. But usually I would advise people, because through those marketing channels that I have out there, I meet people typically at the home the first time. Yeah. And my job isn't necessarily to sell a house, quite frankly. It's to try to prove that I have some value to help you understand your options. I don't really introduce you to a lender yet. Yeah. It's really getting to know you. Sure. And no one really wants a realtor. They typically want a house. Yeah. I'm just the guy in between, right? It's like, exactly, I click the button, show me the house. Like, I'm very much not considered, it feels like, in the as a realtor until after they want something. Then they magically say, okay, now I'll tell you my information in my life. And the best advice I can give to first-time home buyers is to try to do the opposite. Okay. And so if you don't know exactly which home that you want, or if you're trying to decide, try to find a great realtor first. Yeah. So a best practice I would consider is, if you're considering moving to Maryland or Towson or whatever area that you're in, you might want to go on Zillow, and instead of clicking the buttons for homes, you could click around and look for agents.
I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah.
It's a thing. Yeah, so that's why I wanted to bring it up. And so you can look at reviews, you can look at their past sales. Awesome. You can get an idea. It's the way they character. So thank you for leaving a kind review, by the way.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing too, Matt. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think the thing that's so funny is, after I was connected with you, then I went on Google and I was like, Matt Ryan Group. And it was like all 5 stars. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, this is good. Like, this is like that solidifies things. Cause it's like a little awkward if you're like, okay, actually this is my realtor now, like someone else.
It's a challenge.
Worked out really well.
When you can to get a real estate license, if you didn't know, it takes 2 weeks. You could do it online. Yeah. You too can be a realtor. Oh. and so the diversity of experience and talent and quote unquote the team they have can range from absolutely zero. I don't know they don't teach you anything I did with you. They don't teach you any of that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In your 2-week licensing course. Yeah. Nothing.
Like the bare minimum. Yeah.
And so it's nothing to do about the contract. You don't know the other agents. You don't know the inspection companies. You don't know anything. And so that's why I always say I'd recommend interviewing agents first. Sure. I'd like to say we're one of the good ones.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's like, you could have very easily wound up with someone who just started, because think about me, my first day in real estate, I used to advertise then too. Like, as soon as I got a couple bucks, I'd advertise. And I hate to say it to my former self, but I didn't know anything.
And everyone has to start somewhere, right? Yeah.
They do. So it's just, but if I was a buyer, I would think about it like, I don't want to be the guinea pig that Matt learned with. No offense to the people that were with me 20 years ago. But it's just something to consider as a first-time home buyer, because I want to know my agent first. Yeah. Because they're really your quarterback. Mm-hmm. The expectations of your experience should really fall on that agent. Yeah. And then from there, they should introduce you to a good local lender. Yeah. If their lender is junk, you know they're junk, because the best lenders, the John Walds of the world, and I have others. I have A.S. Raymond. I have some other lenders that I love. They only want to work with the best agents, because they have no time or tolerance for the rookies and the people that are really, that cause headaches. And their clients, everything blows up. And so that's a way to find the great lenders, to find a good agent. Yeah. And then everything else, your experience should be hopefully more predictable as a result of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And it totally, it shows, like in my experience. I think I told you this multiple times. I'm so lucky that I was connected with your group, because I think, like what you said about like the group, like the team being your quarterback, that's exactly what it was. Like the buyer makes such a difference in terms of the whole experience. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the compliment. But I pride myself on that process, and it is a process. It's something that we continuously try to get better at and get more refined. But so that's just a tip I wanted to throw out there for a first-time home buyer.
Yeah, they can go that route as well.
Because otherwise it's kind of chance. Yeah. I'm not going to lie.
It was totally chance. Yes. Like, and I also noticed, even like after I toured the places, I got like a newsletter directly, or basically an email directly from your team being like, here are the listings, here are those things, which is nice, because it's like a little bit more curated to exactly what someone is looking for as well. Right. And of course I was just like super stubborn and I was like, yeah, this house or nothing. Right. And I told you that from the start. I was like, I'm not really interested. But at the same time, like just even having that initial good experience is like, if for some reason in the future this house didn't work out and I wanted to look for something, it's all like I have you guys in mind. So
well, thank you. Yeah. So, and I try not to sell. I never push a home on someone that I don't, because hopefully we stay in communication and I earn the right one day to sell it eventually when you list it. And as a result, I don't want to sell you a dud that I can't help you sell.
Right.
And if it has tremendous amount of issues that I can recognize because I've been through hundreds of home inspections, I'd rather have the client as the way I think of it as an agent. I want to have a client, not necessarily sell you a house. It's
a relationship, and it's like building that, and it's continuing with that over time. And again, I feel like going back to like my experience with like, very briefly again, looking in like cities and those type of things versus like this area. That's what I felt more of is like, it's more about the relationship building and those type of things, and someone that like has your back, and it's cyclical, right? It's like, it's business, of course, but it's also just like, being a good human, and like it works out. So,
well, cool. Yeah. So, okay, let's get back to the process. So that was my little segue. So we decided to, you decided ultimately, I told you it's going to be competitive, right? There's another offer coming in.
Right.
You decided to write an offer. What go through your head, like, what did that feel like? How emotionally did you decide to ultimately say, go for it?
Yeah.
Like, tell me what that moment was.
I remember when I was talking to you, Matt, my one quip was like the price of it. It was definitely higher than I was expecting. And so when I found out about like the counter or like the other offer that had come in, that it was basically like at listing price, it might have been like a little bit under. I remember your recommendation was like going a little bit over, and like then that would give me like a competitive fair chance at the place. I was a little like, whew, okay, like let's do this. Like I was like, that feels like a lot. And like when I was going through the breakdown with John, the lender, around like the numbers and those type of things, it definitely felt like a lot. But at the same time, it was like all the other, I actually made a list on my phone of like, when the mortgage feels high, like think about all these different things. And I feel like all the pros like outweighed it. It was just in terms of it being like an investment. Also like, yes, the interest rate like is high right now, but I was told actually at closing that it's like one of the lower ones that they've seen.
What do you remember your interest rate?
It was 6.5, I think. Okay. So yeah. And so, and I also knew that like, I kind of like, I'm not like the most like financially savvy or like, economically like, understanding of that many things or whatever. But I remember like that interest rates are kind of going to be going down over the next year or so. And I just knew at that point, like there would be just lower inventory of places, but also like the places that there are could be like competitive and a lot of like bidding wars and those kind of things. And like may not be the case, but I just knew like, look, I like this place. I'm not like gunning to get a house, but I feel like this is the right house for me. And so it solidified my decision more in terms of actually like being able to put an offer in for it and feeling comfortable with that as well.
So you're very astute. So I want to stop you just for what you just said a moment ago. Why, in your estimation, if interest rates start to go down in the next 6 to 12 months, why would that impact your ability, had you not purchased this home, the next house? You just mentioned that you thought it might be harder in 6 to 12 months. Why do you think that would be?
Well, I just think that there's like, as interest rates go down, people are potentially more interested in buying because it's like the closing costs and the other thing. I don't know if it's closing costs actually, but just like overall, like the amount that they like pay for the house is more maybe financially reasonable for them. And so with that, I assumed that it would be a lot of people. There's just more of a demand for it. And like, maybe I'm not sure about the supply itself, but I've heard again, like stories from friends of like bidding wars and other things over homes that they really loved and losing those. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. Like, I don't really want to be, I'm not that competitive. And so I was like, I don't really want to like have to deal with that. Cause that's where I get like overwhelmed is like, the like, oh, I put an offer on this place. And then it just becomes more and more like, you just continue to go through that process, which I wanted to avoid as much as possible. Like, Well, I'm going to try to weave in while I'm interviewing some information about what you just said, but you are very astute here because that's exactly what we would expect. Right. Okay. And so when rates go down, demand typically goes up because affordability by
default goes up.
Right.
And so that's what makes, that really truly makes what you're describing the most accurate and most likely. None of us know for certain, but that's the most likely scenario, is if rates do go down by 0.5% or another full percent or beyond. Yes, you're going to see people that are on the fence. I can't tell you how many folks I talk to that say, I'm waiting until interest rates get even better.
Yeah.
And if they say that, a lot of people are going to say that. Therefore, it's likely, instead of like some of the advice I gave you, which is, I know there's another offer, it's likely at list based on what I know.
Right.
Go just 5 or 10 over. The likelihood that in the long run is the most prudent information, like the most prudent advice you could take, is because long term, that's going to make the most sense.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was funny too, because I remember asking, I was like, what is that breakdown in terms of like the mortgage? And you were like, okay, I remember you were like, back of the napkin math. Yeah. It's like $10-20 a month. And I was like, okay. Like at this point, I was like, yeah, that's fine.
It's called a cost factor of money. And it's around $6 to $6.50 per thousand.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, and it's interesting too, because that's ultimate. Like, I don't know if that's what like saved me, but like, I mean, the fact that 2 hours later the offer was accepted, I think kind of speaks to how
I did
shook out.
Give him a little bit of pressure.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah. And that was my quarterback again. So
I didn't give the seller a lot of opportunity to think about it.
It's good.
This offer was going to terminate. It was gone.
Yeah.
So, but you have to do it in a nice way, right? You want to be the agent they want to work with, but at the same time, you have to apply some
pressure. Yeah.
That's why you give them an offer that I feel they'd be silly not to take.
Right.
And you can apply pressure. It's really challenging when I have clients say, Matt, present this offer. I know there's 3 other offers, but I'm going to give you 20,000 below list.
Yeah.
And demand it they get accepted right now. I'm like, well, I can't.
You're like, I don't think
I'm
that
good,
makes
but not
sense.
that good.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I don't know. And I did keep asking you as well. Like, I think throughout the entire process, I was like, what would you do in this scenario? Like, personally, what would you do? And you're like, everything I'm advising you on is like personally what I would do. And I think that really helps as well, just kind of put things into perspective. Because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, to be honest, like, first time getting a home, like,
right. You're very coachable, and that's so challenging. And it takes most people at least one lost opportunity in a multiple offer situation before they'd even consider taking advice like that you took on the first.
Yeah.
So that's just, props to you, because that's really challenging to think about it in a different light.
Yeah.
Because,
exactly,
5,000 sounds like a lot of money. If I asked you to just give me 5,000 for that glass of water. But when you're buying a very expensive home, it's very different.
Exactly right. And it wasn't like it was like 50 or whatever. Because I mean, it's again, it depends on what everyone's like financial situation and as to what makes the most sense to them. But at that time, I was like, okay, this feels doable on like on this house that I'm getting, and it's I'm able to do it.
Well, guess what? And now you got it.
Yeah, I got it
as a result. So yes,
success story.
There you go. So you were successful in that.
Yeah.
And so all right. So we went ahead, wrote the offer. You were very competitive, very coachable. So thank you. And you managed to get it under contract. So what was the next step in the process?
Okay. So under contract then I got like a lovely email from Emily on your team, and she just basically gave me like the breakdown of what the next steps were. And also I had a call with John Wald, lender again, and he basically walked me through like what the next steps would be as well. And got some emails from like title. I remember like actually I think it was like that Tuesday after the offer was accepted, the number of emails that I got that I had to go to was a lot. And it was because it was like a couple of them were like, here are your checklists. And then the other ones were like, here are all the supplemental information on top of those. And I was like, okay, I need to be pretty like, organized in terms of like labeling everything and keeping, and I was like, okay, this is a good opportunity for me to like get it together to organize everything and make sure like this process is as seamless as it could be. Just because I was like, I don't want anything to like block it from moving forward towards closing. And I remember the closing was, I think, 4 weeks after. And I was like, might as well do it then. Like there's nothing holding me back from closing later than that. So,
and a lot of this work, and the reason we do it in that order is because a lot of it can be front loaded.
Yeah.
And so we handle quite a bit of it as much as we can on our end. Yeah. And so we communicate with all the different parties, the title, the lender, but still we like to make sure you understand what to expect.
Right.
And so, yes, we send everything to title. We send it to your lender. The lender, I don't care who the lender is. That's always challenging because they need so many documents.
So much.
Supportive. Yeah. I mean, it's even when I buy a home, I'm just like, oh my God, how do people deal with it? That's the worst part.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's like, I remember, just the breakdown of all the documents, like probably sent like 20 to 30 documents over to them. But again, they try to make it as like seamless as possible by being like, okay, we need X, Y, and Z, and like upload it here and all those things. And I think it's also the technology these days is pretty cool, like in terms of how you can track things.
Right.
So I think that really helped as well, of like where things were in the process, what I like had signed, what I hadn't. So it just made it a little bit easier in terms of like wrapping my mind around like this huge life event alongside like other things like personal life and work and all those other things too.
Because the rest of it doesn't completely stop. It's keeps going.
Exactly. That's exactly
Still have to show up to work tomorrow.
Yeah. It's I'm like, oh no, I'm closing on a house. I can't do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you started doing all the paperwork and all the emails, right, going through.
Yeah.
And then the next step that we had set up, because we did home inspections.
Yes. Yeah.
And so explain to me what inspections you had and what your thought process was with inspections.
So I had a general inspection, septic, chimney, and pest. I'm trying to remember if there was another one, but I think that's the gist of it. And I remember thinking too, like, again, I was like asking like my brother and my parents, like, what inspections have you gotten before? And they were like, I think this or I think that. And like my brother sent me over like the inspection report he got and like who they went with, like all these other things as well. And again, I remember like you and Emily had just sent like a list of like, here's these inspections you need. Here's who we recommend. But if you don't decide to go with them, let us know if you need like, if you go with someone else or what that looks like. And I honestly like having your team like schedule the inspections, all those things was like a huge weight off my shoulders, because it was like, here's what you need to show up for. Here's what you don't need to show up for. Here's how we can make the process like even easier. That you're not overwhelmed by like, oh, you don't know like how to like understand the septic inspection or those things. Cause like, I'm like, I don't know what I'm like, again, I don't know what I'm doing in this process. So, so I got those inspections done. I think the one that I showed up for was the general inspection, which was really helpful. I think it was like a 3-hour process. The first 2 hours, Kate, the inspector, went through and walked and did like her thing and looked at everything. And then the last hour, my dad and I went and because I just wanted another pair of eyes from my end, and walked through the whole thing. And she explained everything so well. And it was wonderful. Honestly, it was a very seamless process.
And so we've changed our process slightly. So we try to cover our tail by allowing, obviously, you to choose anyone you would like. But it's one of those things, no different than lending and title. We have our favorites over the years because there are a lot of choices. Right. No different than anyone else. There are some really great ones. Yeah. And less great ones. Exactly. And so some people say, well, my cousin or my uncle or my dad used this company 15 years ago when he bought his house and he really liked them. Right. And I'm like, oh, good God. And then I've never heard of them. Some guy shows up with like a Polaroid camera. You're like, oh, my Lord. Yeah. And it happens. But it's your right as a buyer to choose who you like. But at the same time, you did take advice, because we'd like to think that I've used enough of them and a lot of clients have chosen others. Yeah. I have a definitive opinion as to who I think is going to be going to catch things. Honestly, it kind of covers my tail. Exactly. Because I do not want you buying a home and then finding all these items after you move in, because I get a call and I don't want an unhappy client. Exactly. And also I think like even also after you guys sent me the list, like I'm pretty thorough in terms of like doing my research and those type of things. And so I did like all the research of like the ratings and like reviews and stuff, and it like all checked out. So I think again, after I did that, like the first couple times, I was like, okay, like Matt and team have my back. Like they have their people, but also it's because like they, obviously bring them business from and like referrals, but at the same time, it's like relationship building. And it's also like, we know that they're good at their job, and like, we know that they're going to get the job done the right way. So, well, and it really is illegal. I don't get a check back just to clarify when they use an inspection company of that I recommend. It's really, I am very loyal with the couple people in any category I refer, but it's really quite selfish. It's because I really hold them to a super high standard. Yeah. And in the event something were to get screwed up, they will make it right, because I have leverage. Yeah, exactly. Because I do a lot of business around here, and you will be cut off immediately, and not a little bit cut off. You're totally off. Exactly. And they know it. Right. So the people, and I say it just like that. It's like you get everything or nothing. Yeah. And treat it accordingly. Absolutely. Absolutely. So it again, it's like cyclical. So it's, but yeah, it worked out really well. I was very, like, because I feel like inspections, again, I like through the entire process, I've heard
horror stories at like different stages as well, leading up to the closing. And I feel like inspections, there's a lot that can go wrong. And so I was pleased that like there were definitely a few big things, but we were able to like figure them out.
And you negotiate through it, and you were very coachable in the sense that we didn't try to get you can't get every last little teeny thing. Yeah. It's the big things, the big items. And you had a handful of bigger items.
Definitely. And I think that was the thing
that they agreed to fix.
Yeah, exactly.
The chimney and
the roof. Yep. Yeah. It was, and like, I think we were talking about this too, as well. Like we went through that entire report so thoroughly, that I think like we definitely like picked and chose like what were the right things to focus on. Like I'm not going to focus on like chipping in the bathroom or like the handle of the door is coming off when like the roof is leaking, you know, and
there's active like water in the house.
Exactly.
Like, no, let's focus on that one.
It's like actually the paint color here chipping is like not what I want. So
yeah. So that's part of the process. So after the inspection's done, right? So we made our decisions. We discussed from the list a handful of items that make the big items that we wanted to ask for.
Right.
It takes a few days for them to get quotes. Eventually they come back and, we figure out what they're willing to do.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they really accepted all the...
No, it was great. Yeah.
The big items that we had requested.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then you continue moving forward at that point. That's when it's almost official.
Exactly. And we had like some crazy weather and things like that too that, like
we had snow.
And like a lot of rain, and it still, the timeline was on track, which was great. Right. So, and like a couple permitting things, but it was all, it was all closed out. So
and so we get through that, then it's an appraisal.
Yes. Yeah.
And we get the appraisal back.
Oh yeah. We had that appraisal. I think it was pretty early actually, the appraisal done. It was right around either right before or right after the inspection. Yeah, but that too was seamless. Like it was all taken care of. I just got a report and
that's it. Yeah. Well, it's non-memorable when it comes in at value. It's very memorable when it comes in lower.
Exactly.
Which occasionally happens.
Yeah, exactly. I got really lucky on that one as well.
Yes, so. That's a very memorable experience when that happens to you as a buyer.
And you're like, cool, yeah.
Cool, I owe how much extra?
Yeah, it's like, what's that?
We're negotiating. So it didn't happen to you, fortunately.
Yeah.
And then you settle, like you said, after that, it's more about a final walkthrough.
Yes,
prior
exactly.
To settlement.
Yeah, we did that the same, I think, the hour before closing. So we did that, and then settlement was right after.
And we try to do that as close to settlement as possible. Yeah. Just simply, if you do it a day or two or three in advance, you don't know what happened right before settlement.
Exactly.
And so it's always good to put eyes on your property and walk through it right before, because the moment you sign, that bad boy's yours.
Exactly. And you're like, you can't be like, oh, actually, take back. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of the timeline. And then you go to settlement. Settlement takes what? How long do you think that was?
It was like 30 minutes. It was really quick. Yeah. Just quick. Signing a bunch of papers.
Well, post-COVID, a lot of the sellers, including ours, they sign in advance.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so pre-COVID, a majority of sellers would be there with you.
Yeah.
And it made for this very semi-formal, oftentimes awkward situation where you're like looking at the seller's side, trying to figure out what they're making off of this. They're like eyeballing you, like, is this the person or this family right for this house?
Yeah, exactly.
It was a little unusual, but I'd say it's at least 50%, if not more. Yeah, we don't get to see the seller ever.
Exactly. Well, that was like a pleasant surprise. Actually, the seller came in at the end. I think when I was the settlement, like my appointment was at like 12, and the seller came in at 12:30. So it was nice to like meet her very briefly. And it was like, congrats, like shaking hands. And I was like, okay, bye. Like I'm done. So
it's easier. So it's easier for everybody.
Exactly.
So that's like kind of the new thing. Eventually we'll go paperless.
I know, and digital, right?
Was that strange to you that we had all this paper still?
So much paper. I think Craig and I were talking about that. There's like how many trees were cut down for the amount of paper.
They are so slow. The industry is so slow to change. They all want what we call wet signatures, the actual ink signatures. And it eventually, we all know eventually it's going to happen, but it's not there yet.
Not there yet. It was nice though for like the offer and other things too, though. It was all like DocuSign and digital signatures, which made things just so much easier too. But yeah.
So that's basically, then you get the keys after you sign.
Exactly. And then like the fun begins, right?
That's it. It's like, oh my God. So, but in your situation, it all happened, like I said, pretty quickly.
Yeah. 4 weeks. Exactly. Almost. Yeah.
And I guess looking back, now it's done. You have the keys. I mean, what do you think are you either most proud of or most excited about now that you are officially a homeowner?
I think just, I'm excited to like live in the place and to like decorate it and like make it my home and like all the things of like making memories in it and those type of things. But it's what I love is that it's just like a space of my own. It's something that I own. I feel like I'm very proud of that. And again, like really, I do have to say, like 3 years ago, like my financial situation and those kind of things were not in this place that I feel very fortunate that they were the last couple of years that allowed me to do this. But it just feels really good, especially like doing it on my own or just generally being able to like, have my own investment property, which is great. So yeah, I think that's what I'm most excited about.
It's a big achievement.
Yeah, and it's cool.
It's really what some people still measure as the American dream.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think about that with my parents all the time, too, because they like moved from India and like they have the whole thing where they came with like one suitcase and all of that, too. And how they were able to like, you know, raise my brother and I in this like beautiful house and like send us to a good school and like, you know, dinners every night and those type of things as well. But yeah, I mean, again, for the longest time, I was like, I'm not buying a house. That it feels really good to buy a place that I feel like really comfortable in the space itself. And it all worked out, honestly.
Worked out. And you know, for all the problems we have in this country, which there's plenty, it's still, it's still something. I talk to plenty of buyers that are out of the country. Yeah. And they just, it's not easy to get capital. No. And they can't get mortgages. I did a Zoom meeting with someone who signed with me to help him buy here in Maryland. Cool. And I believe he's in Pakistan, and he assumed he had to have all cash. He's been saving for years and years and years. Yeah. You just can't get a mortgage like this. No, exactly. You know, here you can buy a home with as little as 3% down. Right, exactly. Right, and there's options. Like there are different options, and it's which is fantastic. So it's great. So I always say, just go in if this is ever a desire of yours to be a buyer. Everyone has to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. I think it's always getting back to have a team. Yeah. If you're lucky enough to click a button and things work out, that's fabulous. Exactly. I'm about almost 70% referrals at this point in my career, which I'm grateful for. It's a lot less awkward than meeting you randomly at a house. Exactly. But still, that happens quite a bit, right? Cool. It's still a third of my business almost. Mm-hmm. But it's such a pleasure to have met you and to... Yeah, you as well, Matt. And your team was fantastic the entire way through. I felt very grateful for this entire experience and how it worked out too. And it's kind of crazy that it's like weeks ago, I didn't even know like this existed. And it's like a month later, I'm like, all right, here we are. And this is like for indefinitely. So it's cool. That's awesome. Like, well, it's a journey, and you will never, I think probably forever, you'll be a homeowner, whether it's this home or the next home. Right? It's usually once you become a homeowner, typically you become a homeowner for life. Yeah, exactly. It snowballs, right? It does. And equity, I'm gonna take some, and appreciation. Some advice from you, Matt, right? I'm gonna get my 15 places. So I do occasionally plant seeds. I call it planting seeds. I always expose. It's one of the reasons I do this silly podcast is because it's good though. It's it's planting seeds, and it grows into something, but it's an option. It's like if you want to build wealth, still it's a primary residence. We all start, you have to put a roof over your own head. Exactly. I tell people, but then beyond that, you want to build wealth. Right. And now that you know the process, guess what? Buying an investment property is very, very similar to what you just did. Yeah. Except you have none of the pain of, well, I want to live here. Do I want to have memories here? Exactly. A lot of the emotion is taken out. Which is nice, right? It's like, and it's a business transaction. It's a business, exactly. And it's like it puts things into perspective, and it's very like realistic once again you're like educated and have the desire to do something. And just remember, now you're not done with me, right? Yeah, never. As soon as you have a home, there's things, we didn't finish that whole list in the inspection. Right. Right. Yeah, so it's one of those things that we'll continue to have painters and contractors and a home is something we have to maintain and just care for and love and improve over time. And so hopefully you can rely on me over time to absolutely. No different than my inspection and lenders. It's I have a network of people that are local that are willing to do whatever it takes to help my clients. And so exactly, I have a whole laundry list of things, and I keep joking with you that I'm like my dad wants even like Matt's referrals. I was talking to him about some of the things he needs at his home, and you said no. Yeah, worry about me first. And deal with Dad later. Exactly. I was like, can we close on this first, and then you can get all your stuff done? Like, let's do that first. But well, I'll help him soon enough. Exactly. I guess we're done now, so you can send him my way again. Well, I think that's it. I think hopefully I did a decent enough job helping to explain what the process was like, what your thought process and the actual process was like. Absolutely. Yeah, this was fun. Anything I left out, do you think? I don't think so. I think, again, it's like it doesn't become like a reality until you
until you just like connect with someone who's able to make that happen. And I think that's the thing. Like on my own, it felt very daunting and overwhelming. But like once things got rolling and I chatted with you and others as well, like it really does work out. If it wasn't this place, like there would have been something in the future or whatever, as long as my desire was there to find a place. And so again, at like, you know, there's a lot of barriers in terms of finances and those type of things. But I think just like educating yourself and talking to someone to at least understand the options is like the first step.
And I had to throw this question in because just the way you described that, I just spoke to someone yesterday about how AI is trying to take over real estate.
Oh, yeah.
And as someone who just went through this process, they're trying to essentially replace most realtors at some point, right, with AI.
Yeah.
Because they want to streamline it. They want to reduce the transactional cost associated with this process, which I get, right? That's happening in all industries.
Right.
So from your perspective, how would you feel if this was a computer generated experience?
I think there's like certain things that it could be, but it was like all the things that already were electronic, like understanding where you were in the process and like signing things. But I think like having someone next to you to like walk through these things, like in the inspection or actually walking through the home, like I feel like I'd feel weird if like there was like a little electronic box where I just like went into the house myself and like walked through and like the inspection. Like I think that it was nice having someone like there every step of the way, even like beyond just like the steps of this process, but just to like, what are your personal takes on this? And like kind of go back and forth and like have that rapport that like I don't think that you can get out of an AI tool. I think there's certain things that are going to be like automated and scaled, but I don't foresee like this like personal touch of like what a realtor brings to this process as being something that can be replaced.
It's really the only hope I feel like we have is that I think some of the value that I think a human, right, someone that's talented as a professional,
right,
and so not every agent, right, might qualify, but I think some of the best value we have is to be almost like coaches and to help with the human emotional side of things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the relatable, like you kind of want someone that you trust. And I think that's the only reason I feel like I might have a job in 10 or 20 years is that's going to be hard to replace. Like financial advisors, there's quite a bit of that's been automated and replaced by technology.
Yeah.
But I don't know if everyone's going to want that experience.
Exactly. And I think that's like at the core of like human nature and tendencies. It's like that emotional value that I don't think you can just like replace with like a robot or with like an automated AI tool. That I think is like, that humanistic that human characteristic. That's especially so important, I think, in this field as well.
Well, it's my favorite part of the field. A house is a house, but it's the people you meet and the journey that you get to make them, help them through. That's my favorite part. So
I agree. I do this like thing, like as a, like one of the last things, like I do this like top 3, bottom 3 of like my week. And it could be like work, personal, other things. And I remember last week, like my top 3 was like obviously like closing on the house, but it was, I think, meeting like you, Emily, Craig, John through this entire process. That's what I marked as like one of my top 3 things. And I think that's like a nice way to like round out like that the conversation about AI and like that replacement, like what I'm like, okay, thank you, computer, for like helping me close on this house. Like that's not what I would have wrote. So
you're the most to me. I need to adopt that. Forget any advice I just told you on this podcast. I'm adopting those things.
No. It's just the way my mind works. But
that's fabulous. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on owning your first home.
Appreciate it. Thank you for getting me to this point. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
This was fun.
All right. Well, take care. Thanks again.
Thanks.